The security cameras in Westfield Shopping Center had been tracking the young black teenager for the past 20 minutes. 17-year-old Marcus Thompson moved through the luxury wing of the mall with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. But to loss prevention officer Derek Mills, he looked like trouble waiting to happen. Mills had profiled hundreds of potential shoplifters during his 8 years working mall security. And this kid was checking all the boxes. Young black male, no shopping bags despite visiting multiple stores, frequently checking his phone, and now lingering outside high-end retailers where the most expensive thefts typically occurred. In Mills's experience, teenagers like this one were either planning something or working with a crew. Marcus was dressed in a simple gray hoodie, dark jeans, and white sneakers, nothing flashy, nothing expensive looking. His appearance was deliberately unremarkable, a habit he developed after inheriting wealth that he wasn't ready to advertise to the world. But Mills had been working mall security for 8 years, and he knew the signs. Young black kid, no shopping bags, moving from store to store without buying anything, occasionally checking his phone. Classic shoplifting behavior. What Mills couldn't see was the weight that Marcus carried with him everywhere now. The responsibility of managing properties worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. The loneliness of being the only person in his high school who owned commercial real estate, and the constant pressure of living up to his grandmother's legacy while still trying to figure out who he was. "Keep eyes on the subject in the gray hoodie," Mills spoke into his radio, alerting his team. "Possible theft in progress near the Rolex boutique. I want backup positioned at the north and south exits." Marcus paused outside the watch store looking through the window at the display cases filled with timepieces worth more than most people's annual salary. He pulled out his phone and seemed to be taking pictures of the merchandise, another red flag for Mills. What Mills didn't see was that Marcus was actually checking the inventory numbers against his digital records, making notes about which models were selling well and which ones needed to be repositioned for better visibility. As the new owner of Westfield Shopping Center, he was still learning the details of managing a retail empire. 2 months ago, Marcus had been just another high school senior planning for college, worried about SAT scores and scholarship applications like his classmate. Then his grandmother, Margaret Thompson, had passed away from cancer, leaving him something that would change his life forever. Thompson had been quietly buying real estate for 40 years, accumulating properties across the city, while working as a cleaning lady and saving every penny she could. Her biggest investment had been Westfield Shopping Center, purchased for a fraction of its current value back in the 1980s when the area was still developing. The inheritance had been a shock to everyone, including Mark. His grandmother had never talked about money, never acted wealthy, never even hinted that she owned anything more valuable than her small house in the old neighborhood. She had continued cleaning offices in downtown buildings well into her 70s, taking 3 buses to work every morning, and bringing home leftover food from office parties to stretch their grocery budget. But Margaret Thompson had been playing a much longer game than anyone realized. Every dollar she saved from her cleaning jobs went into real estate investments. Every tax refund, every small windfall, every bonus check had been carefully reinvested in properties throughout the city. She had studied zoning laws, tracked development patterns, and quietly accumulated an empire, while everyone assumed she was just another working-class grandmother. Her will had made it clear everything she had built was now his, including the most successful shopping mall in the county. Along with the properties came detailed notebooks filled with her handwritten observations about property management, tenant relations, and the importance of treating every person with dignity regardless of their background or economic status. "Remember, baby," she had told him during their last conversation in the hospital, "money doesn't make you better than anyone. It just gives you more responsibility to do right by people." Mills watched as Marcus entered the jewelry store, and his suspicions intensified. This was exactly where expensive items went missing, small, valuable pieces that could easily be concealed. He signaled to his backup officers, positioning them near the exits while maintaining visual contact through the store's glass frontage. "Control, this is Mills," he spoke into his radio. "Subject has entered Rolex boutique. Request backup units to cover all corridors. This kid's been casing the place for 20 minutes, and now he's making his move. The mall's security protocol had been developed over years of dealing with shoplifting incidents, most of which followed predictable patterns. Young people, especially teenagers, would spend time observing store layouts, identifying blind spots in camera coverage, and waiting for busy periods when staff attention was divided among multiple customers. Mills had seen it hundreds of times before, and in his experience, kids who dressed down in hoodies and jeans were trying to avoid drawing attention to themselves while they committed theft. What Mills didn't do was that Marcus's casual clothing was a deliberate choice based on lessons his grandmother had taught him about moving through the world without advertising wealth or success. "People treat you different when they think you got money," she used to say. "Sometimes you want to see how they act when they think you just another person like them." Inside Rolex Boutique, Marcus approached the counter, where sales associate Jennifer Walsh was helping another customer. She glanced at him briefly, taking in his casual appearance and youthful face, then returned her attention to the well-dressed businessman who was considering a $15,000 Submariner. The contrast between the two customers couldn't have been more stark. The businessman wore a tailored suit, Italian leather shoes, and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to expensive purchases. Marcus, despite being the actual owner of the store's location, looked like any other teenager who had wandered in off the street. Jennifer had worked in luxury retail for 5 years, and she had learned to prioritize customers based on visual cues that usually predicted purchasing power. Well-dressed older customers were serious buyers. Teenagers in hoodies were usually just browsing, wasting time, or occasionally causing problems. It was a system that had served her well in terms of commission earnings, but it was about to lead to the most embarrassing mistake of her career. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, waiting for a break in their conversation. Jennifer barely looked up. "I'll be with you in a moment," she said dismissively, clearly prioritizing her current customer over the teenager who obviously couldn't afford anything in the store. She turned back to the businessman with renewed attention. "As I was saying, sir, this particular model has an excellent resale value, and the warranty coverage is comprehensive." Marcus waited patiently, used to this kind of treatment. Since inheriting his grandmother's properties, he'd learned that looking young and dressing casually often meant being ignored or dismissed by people who made assumptions based on appearance. Outside the store, Mills was coordinating with his team through his earpiece. "Subject is now inside Rolex. Keep all exits covered. If he makes any sudden movements or tries to leave quickly, we move in." After several minutes, Jennifer finally approached Marcus with obvious reluctance. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, her tone suggesting that whatever he was looking for probably wasn't available in their price range. "I wanted to check on the display rotation," Marcus said. "Some of these pieces have been in the same positions for weeks, and I think we could improve visibility for the new GNT models." Jennifer looked confused. "I'm sorry, but are you with corporate? I don't recognize you, and I wasn't told about any merchandising changes." "Actually," Marcus began, but before he could explain, Mills burst through the store entrance with 2 backup officers. "Security! Nobody move!" Mills shouted, causing every customer in the store to freeze and turn toward the commotion. "Son, I need you to step away from the counter and keep your hands visible." Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. "Is there a problem, officer?" "The problem is we've been watching you case this store and several others for the past half hour," Mills replied, his hand resting on his radio. "We have you on camera taking pictures of expensive merchandise, and now you're in here acting suspicious around jewelry worth more than most people's cars." A small crowd had begun to gather outside the store, drawn by the security presence and raised voices. Several people were already pulling out phones to record what looked like it might become an arrest. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said calmly, reaching slowly into his hoodie pocket. "Don't reach for anything," Mills barked. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus froze, his hand halfway to his pocket. "I was just getting my ID to clear this up. You can show your ID to the police," Mills said, pulling out his radio. "Central, this is Mills. I need NVPD to respond to Rolex Boutique for a possible theft in progress. Suspect is a black male, approximately 17 years old, gray hoodie, dark jeans." Jennifer looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized the situation was escalating beyond a simple security check. Other customers in the store were backing away, uncertain whether they were witnessing a real crime or a case of racial profiling. "Sir, I really think you should let him explain," Jennifer said quietly, but Mills waved her off. "Ma'am, please step back and let security handle this," he replied firmly. Marcus felt the familiar frustration of being judged by his appearance rather than his character or circumstances. But he had learned from his grandmother to remain calm in difficult situations and to always treat people with respect, even when they didn't extend the same courtesy to him. "Officer Mills," Marcus said, reading the name tag on the security guard's uniform. "I understand you're doing your job, but I think if you'd let me show you my identification, we could resolve this quickly." But what Mills and his team didn't know was that they were about to make the biggest mistake of their career. The police arrived within 5 minutes, 2 uniformed officers who had responded to dozens of similar calls at the mall over the years. Officer Janet Rodriguez and Officer Mike Chen entered the store to find Mills and his team surrounding a calm teenager while nervous customers watched from a distance. Rodriguez had been a patrol officer for 12 years, and she had seen every type of situation the job could present. Shoplifting calls at upscale malls were routine, but something about this scene felt different. The suspect wasn't displaying any of the usual signs of guilt or panic. He wasn't trying to flee, wasn't making excuses, and wasn't showing the defensive body language she typically associated with people who had been caught stealing. Chen, her partner for the past 3 years, was equally experienced in reading situations quickly. The teenager's posture was relaxed, his eye contact was direct and respectful, and his hands were visible and non-threatening. In their experience, guilty suspects rarely displayed this level of calm composure when confronted by multiple officers. "What do we have here?" Officer Rodriguez asked, immediately assessing the situation while noting the crowd of onlookers that had gathered outside the store. "Possible shoplifting suspect," Mills explained, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed he had caught a criminal in the act. "Been watching him move through the mall for over 20 minutes, taking pictures of expensive merchandise, acting suspicious. He was in here trying to get behind the jewelry counter when we intervened." Officer Chen looked at Marcus, who was standing with his hands visible, making no aggressive movements or attempts to flee. "Son, what's your name?" "Marcus Thompson," Marcus replied respectfully. "And I'd really like to show you some identification that I think will clear this." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "Okay, Marcus, move slowly and show me what you've got." Marcus carefully reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out his wallet. But instead of just producing a driver's license, he handed over a leather folder that was thicker than expected. Officer Rodriguez opened it and found Marcus's ID, but also something that made her expression change immediately: a business license, several legal documents, and a laminated certificate that made her look up at the teenager with new eyes. "Officer Chen," she said quietly, "I think you need to see this." Officer Chen examined the documents, his eyebrows rising as he read. The business license was clear: Marcus Thompson, owner-operator, Westfield Shopping Center. The legal documents were from the county recorder's office, showing property transfer from the estate of Margaret Thompson to Marcus Thompson. The certificate was from the city's business registration office, confirming his authority to operate commercial properties within the municipal limit. "Mr. Thompson," Officer Rodriguez said, her tone completely different now, "can you explain what you were doing in the jewelry store?" "I was checking on the merchandise displays," Marcus explained. "I've been trying to learn all aspects of the mall operation since I inherited it from my grandmother 2 months ago. I was making notes about which watch models seemed to be selling well and which ones might need better positioning to attract customers." The color drained from Mills's face as he realized what he was hearing. That's impossible. You're just a kid." Officer Chen looked at the security guard with barely concealed irritation. "Mills, according to these legal documents, this young man is the lawful owner of this entire shopping center. That means you work for him." The crowd that had gathered outside the store was growing larger, and the sound of their conversation was carrying into the corridor. Several people were live-streaming the encounter on social media, already sensing that something unexpected was happening. Marcus maintained his composure, but there was a hint of authority in his voice as he spoke. "Mills, I understand that you were trying to protect the mall's merchants, and I appreciate your diligence. But I'd like to know why you assumed I was shoplifting when I was simply examining merchandise in stores that I own." Mills stuttered, trying to find words that would justify his actions. "You looked. I mean, we have procedures." "What procedures?" Marcus asked calmly. "Are those procedures based on the way someone is dressed, or the color of their skin, or their age? Because I'm pretty sure none of those factors should determine how you treat people in my mall." Jennifer, the sales associate who had initially dismissed Marcus, was watching the exchange with growing horror as she realized how badly she had misjudged the situation. The well-dressed businessman she had been prioritizing was now looking uncomfortable, clearly aware that he was witnessing something significant. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward to address the crowd that had gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a misunderstanding here. No crime has been committed, and we're going to clear the area and allow everyone to go about their business." But Marcus wasn't finished. "Actually, officer, I'd like to speak with Mr. Mills and his team privately. Could we use the mall management office?" Officer Chen nodded. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. It's your property." As the group moved toward the administrative offices, Mills's backup officers were beginning to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. They had just accused their employer's grandson of theft, live-streamed by dozens of witnesses and recorded on the mall's own security cameras. Hook, but what happened next would change everything about how the mall operated. In the privacy of the management office, Marcus sat behind the desk that had belonged to his grandmother's property management company, with Mills and his 3 backup officers standing awkwardly in front of him. The police officers remained present to ensure everything stayed professional. "Miss Mills," Marcus began, "can you tell me about the training you received when you started working here?" Mills shifted uncomfortably. "Standard loss prevention training, recognizing suspicious behavior, apprehending shoplifters, coordinating with law enforcement." "And what constitutes suspicious behavior in your training materials?" Marcus asked. Mills hesitated. "Well, you know, people acting nervous, avoiding eye contact, concealing merchandise, moving between stores without purchasing anything." "I see," Marcus nodded. "And in your 8 years of experience here, what percentage of the people you've detained for suspected shoplifting have been black teenagers?" The question hung in the air like a challenge that Mills clearly didn't want to answer. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Miss Thompson, while we understand your concerns about profiling, we should probably wrap this up and let everyone get back to work." Marcus looked at her respectfully, but firmly. "Officer, with all due respect, this is exactly the conversation we need to have, because what happened here today doesn't happen in isolation. It happens because people make assumptions about who belongs in certain spaces and who doesn't." He turned back to Mills. "Sir, I grew up in this community. I've been shopping in this mall since I was a kid. My grandmother cleaned offices in this building for 20 years before she could afford to buy it. And in all that time, I've watched security follow black customers, question black teenagers, and assume that people who look like me don't have legitimate business in stores like this." Mills opened his mouth to object, but Marcus continued. "I'm not going to fire you, Mr. Mills, but I am going to require you and your entire team to undergo comprehensive bias training, and we're going to review every incident report from the past 2 years to look for patterns in how different customers are treated." One of the backup officers, a younger man named Torres, spoke up. "Miss Thompson, for what it's worth, I think you handled this situation with a lot more grace than I would have." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "I learned from my grandmother that how people treat you says more about them than it does about you. But that doesn't mean we accept unfair treatment or let it continue." He stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the main concourse of the mall where hundreds of shoppers were going about their day, unaware of the conversation taking place in the office above them. "This mall serves people from every background, every income level, every race and ethnicity in our community." Marcus said, "My grandmother bought this place because she believed it could be a space where everyone felt welcome and respected. That's what I intended to be." Officer Chen checked his watch. "Mr. Thompson, if there's nothing else you need from us, we'll head back to patrol." "Actually, there is one more thing," Marcus said, turning back to Mills. "I want you to personally apologize to Jennifer in the Rolex store. She was put in an uncomfortable position because of assumptions you made about me, and she deserves an explanation." Mills nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir. I'll take care of that." After the officers left, Marcus spent the next hour meeting with department heads from around the mall, introducing himself properly, and discussing his vision for the property. Word of the incident had spread quickly through the building, and many employees were curious to meet the young man who had inherited control of their workplace. Marcus Thompson, now 18 and balancing his senior year of high school with running a multi-million-dollar retail property, had transformed Westfield Shopping Center into a model of inclusive business practices. The bias training he had mandated for security staff had been so successful that other malls in the region began implementing similar programs. The incident with Mills had been recorded by multiple witnesses and had gone viral with over 12 million views across various social media platforms. The story had been picked up by local and national news outlets, making Marcus one of the youngest property owners in the country to gain national attention for promoting social justice in retail environments. Mills, to his credit, had taken the training seriously and had become an advocate for fair treatment of all customers. He still worked at the mall, but now he mentored new security officers on recognizing and avoiding unconscious bias in their interactions with the public. Jennifer from the Rolex boutique had also learned from the experience, and she had requested additional training on customer service without prejudice. Sales in her store had actually increased as word spread that Westfield was a place where all customers were treated with respect regardless of their appearance. Marcus had used his newfound platform to speak at high schools and community organizations about entrepreneurship, inherited wealth, and social responsibility. He had also established a scholarship fund for students from his grandmother's old neighborhood, ensuring that her legacy of investing in the community would continue. The mall itself had become more than just a shopping center. It had become a symbol of what was possible when young people were given the opportunity to lead and when businesses committed themselves to serving all members of their community fairly. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus had proved that ownership wasn't just about having legal title to a property. It was about taking responsibility for creating spaces where everyone could feel safe, respected, and valued. When reporters asked him about the day he was nearly arrested in his own mall, Marcus always gave the same answer. "My grandmother taught me that you can't control how people see you, but you can control how you respond to their assumptions. Sometimes the best response is to exceed their expectations and then use your success to make sure other people don't face the same challenges." The teenager who had been profiled as a shoplifter was now profiled in business magazines as one of the most promising young entrepreneurs in the country. And every day, as he walked through the corridors of Westfield Shopping Center, he made sure that no one else would be judged by the color of their skin or the clothes on their back. His grandmother would have been proud. If this story inspired you, remember that success comes in many forms and at many ages. Hit subscribe to see more stories about overcoming assumptions and building something better. Share this reminder that respect should never depend on appearance, and that sometimes the people others underestimate are the ones who end up changing everything.